We're back for your ears only. I'm Melissa Exelberth.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. The government has lost all public trust. That was Japanese opposition lawmaker Said Masako Mori on a recent audit revealing that half the budget for reconstruction following last year's superquake and tsunami has been misspent on unrelated projects. Government officials predict a trickle-down effect benefiting more needy communities. Now this.
All up and down the East Coast, there are mayors, many of them Republicans, who are being told, you got to move these houses back away from the ocean. You got to lift them up. Climate change is going to raise the water levels on a permanent basis. If you want your town insured, you have to do this.
The devastation of Hurricane Sandy last week re-energized the debate over humankind's contribution to global warming. But even if it ultimately proved to be unrelated and essentially cyclical, most experts had to agree with former President Bill Clinton that higher temperatures and rising seas are likely to make storms more severe and more damaging, especially to coastal regions, at least for the foreseeable future.
The more immediate question is how and how well the related challenges are being handled now and in the immediate future. The answer could well affect public opinion about the relevance of FEMA and the larger role of government in America. For a professional appraisal for your ears only, we turn now to Marty Pastula, publisher of Emergency Management Magazine. Welcome to the program.
Well, hello there. Thank you.
We're all aware of the technological advances in weather forecasting and tracking that provided so much graphic early warning, and I gather there have been some technical advances in getting out more local and personalized alerts through various smartphone programs, including one that works even if the phone is off and charging. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that just recently, as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, the state of Massachusetts actually adopted a new smartphone technology called Ping 4. And the uniqueness of Ping 4 is, well, because of the proliferation of so many smartphones, what this has capabilities of doing is actually allowing people to download the application without capturing any personal citizen information, which is a nice thing. And they can, what they call geofence, or actually draw a map around a particular location, and then they can send out an alert warning and ping each of those cell phones, and it's it's quite a great technology, and it's good to see things are moving in that direction.
Are there other new technological advances that help deal with management of a crisis as opposed to the weather forecasts and warnings that we see?
Well, I wouldn't say they're necessarily new. Ever since Katrina, the country has adopted NIMS, which is the National Information Incident Management System. And, it's a framework or a guideline that the entire country uses, including military personnel.
Given all of these advances, are we any closer to getting better intercommunications between the various first responder organizations, police, fire, FEMA, than existed at the World Trade Center on 9/11?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it was President Kennedy back in the 60s that said to us, it's going to take, we're going to get to the moon in 6 years, and we did it. And since 9/11, we kept saying we're going to be interoperable. And at this point, we're still not interoperable. But a lot of things are being done in that direction. We're almost there.
Is the problem technological, or is it that various special interests, commercial interests, don't want to give up their space in the in the radio broadcast world, in the spectrum?
Well, it's policy and guidelines. Now, you mentioned spectrum. One of those key things that's happening, key initiatives, is the fact that we're going to what we call the 700 megahertz D-block channel. And I don't want to go too technical on you, but that's taking all those 700 megahertz spectrum and putting them into one area that only public safety can access.
Without getting partisan or even political, what can you say about the way Sandy has demonstrated the relative importance of local, state, and federal responses, including FEMA? In New York, I hear a lot more complaints about the city and state than about the feds.
Well, all disasters are local, and, our first line of defense is going to be those local first responders. Now, we have very good mutual aid programs put in place. So once the local responders are sort of tapped out, so to speak, we go from that to the Army, Red Cross, National Guard, and the military is actually trained in the same National Incident Management System that I was talking about. every military base has a certified emergency manager or a CEM on staff, and they help coordinate those efforts using that same framework.
Would there be any way of dividing the FEMA budget among states without really knowing which ones were going to be most affected by a crisis, depending on its location and the extent of it?
Well, what we created, or what the federal government created post 9/11, was what they call UASIs. Those are urban area security initiatives. And the budget for those UASIs is really given out by the Department of Homeland Security based on critical infrastructure. So, for instance, if you look at, I was looking at the budget myself about 2 years ago, and I noticed Anaheim was getting more funding than Miami. And as we all know, Miami gets a lot of hurricanes, right? What Anaheim has is a lot of critical infrastructure. They have, Disneyland, Disney World, Duck Stadium, Angel Stadium, etc. So it's really based on the critical infrastructure of a particular location.
What about relying more on the private sector where there's no shortage of emergency management firms? Could they and private charities alone deal with a disaster on the scale of Sandy?
Well, I think over the last 3 to 4 years, this is where we've made the most progress. I attended a meeting of all places in Bentonville, Arkansas at Walmart's headquarters, and it was called by FEMA. So Craig Fugate, showed up. He's the administrator. And in that meeting, we had all of the major corporations, and I wouldn't say all, but about 60 to 70 of the major corporations, Walmart, Target, CVS Pharmacy, et cetera. And Craig's message to those folks was, look, we get it. We know you're a for-profit organization, but how about if we set up memorandums of understanding? So in the event that there's an earthquake or a hurricane, and let's use Los Angeles for an example, there's 44 Walmarts within the county of Los Angeles. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to just announce to the people, rather than be shipping in water, food, and blankets, to say, hey, just go to your local Walmart and pick the stuff up? And then FEMA reimburses Walmart.
Let's look ahead to the best ideas for adapting to climate change and mitigating damage from it, beginning with a metropolis like New York that can't just move inland. I hear that there are seawalls and sea gates that could block river and ocean storm surges.
That's true. That's true. We wouldn't have had the catastrophe that we had in Katrina, had the dike's not broken, so to speak. They say for every dollar that we put into prevention, it's worth 5 in recovery. And, there's certainly a lot of work being done to fix these levees with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Well, there are more resilient construction methods that could be required for new buildings.
Yes, and those are coming out all the time. I mean, architects right now in college are being trained to harden the buildings that they're building of the future.
Marty Pastula is publisher of Emergency Management Magazine and emergencymgmt.com.
Quote from the news, a conspiracy of silence to actively conceal the truth. That was Pennsylvania Attorney General Linda Kelly on the indictment of former Penn State President Graham Spanier and 2 other former university officials on charges of failing to inform authorities about child sexual abuse by Jerry Sandusky when he was top assistant to iconic football coach Joe Paterno.
Next, China changes hands. But what about its direction? For your ears only.